Hi, I'm Dr. Faisal Amir. Currently, I'm working as a postgraduate resident. I'm in my second year at the Institute of Psychiatry, which is a part of Rawalpindi Medical University. It is in Rawalpindi, Pakistan. Uh, I was I got interested in psychiatry during my house job, or the internship, you can say, which I did at the Mayo Hospital. There, I got interested in the cultural aspects of psychiatry as well, and also the combination of literature and psychiatry, which I was always interested in literature, so that uh, kind of uh, merged with that. Now about my projects, I have actually sent two projects which I will present at the uh, Rotterdam World Association of Cultural Psychiatry Conference. So the first one is related to eating disorders. It is under the ambit of eating disorders, and the specific eating disorder is orthorexia nervosa. Now, a bit of introduction about orthorexia nervosa. It is not as yet part of the DSM-5 or ICD-11 or ICD-10. So not part of the official classifications, but there is a lot of literature on it, and the research on it is going on. So what is it basically means? Orthorexia means straight, and orthorexia nervosa means basically correct or straight eating. It means that uh, a preoccupation and obsession with eating the right kind of food, and which goes to such an extent that it leads to biological, psychological, and social harms. For example, if a person is eating only one kind of food, only consuming juices, for example, then that can be a biological harm, and the person can spend so much time and so much energy and effort preparing the food that it leads to financial and social burden. So what I got interested in reading about it because it was sort of interesting. Uh, and then I found that most of the research that has been done, for example, it has been research has been done in Pakistan, and a lot of research has been done in Western countries. It is done on populations which are either Western populations or either populations which are educated and which profess sort of Western values, and their thoughts and thoughts about eating are influenced about from eating. And uh, now we move on to orthorexia, this my concept, which is hot cold uh, variant, or I also call it orthorexia galenic. That is just a name that I'm giving it. So this is the concept which is actually very widespread in many indigenous cultures in subcontinent, Chinese culture, even Native American cultures, and it is the concept that they believe, and I mean our culture also believe, that foods have hot and cold properties, and these properties impact the health. They have an impact on health, and it is this concept is broader than that, because they also think that some diseases are hot and some are cold, and they also feel that some medicines are hot. So the new categories are also subsumed within it. So I thought that what if orthorexia nervosa develops in a person whose whole cultural milieu and whose whole cultural belief is this hot cold idea of food. And after that, I discussed it with my seniors, my colleagues, and they said that they have seen. And then I found a couple of cases, and one case I got consent, and I presented, and I explored the whole belief regarding it, what kind of foods they considered cold, what kinds of food they consider hot. And for example, the patient, she had a very strict sort of complete diet, and she had divided foods into certain uh, groups, hot and cold. And she said, if I eat hot cold, then this does this some things, certain things to me, and cold foods does other things. And she could only eat some kinds of foods, and she had stopped going out. uh, she spent most of her time being obsessed with this food and the symptoms that they produce. So this is my idea, this project about orthorexia, the humoral or cultural variant of orthorexia. So I'm proposing that we should study this aspect of orthorexia nervosa. The second project, I call it POH, and this is also a name that I have given because all the cultural uh, concepts, they are named after local uh, concepts. And POH is basically a month which is the winter month in the Punjabi or local calendar. And this is the month in which we saw our first patient. And also I felt that this confluence of autumn and winter, it kind of describes this disorder. Not disorder, but this concept. So this was this is a case series. We saw a certain number of patients, me and my colleagues at our institute, and they had some aspects in common with them. All of them were females in their mid 30s to late 30s or early 40s. All of them had mild intellectual disability, mild to borderline, which was unrecognized in this terms by the patients, and all had similar life histories. So if we start with this life history, that all of these females, they were brought up in a milieu in which their condition was not understood, and this milieu was slightly less educated, low social socioeconomic status, low to low middle socioeconomic status. And in this milieu, their behavior, which we would understand as being due to the mild intellectual disability, it was, in all of these cases, it was attributed to their being stubborn or being hard-headed. And so this led to this pattern in which from the early age, all of them had to undergo physical and social abuse, emotional abuse, even including traumatic brain injuries in all of these cases. And when they grew up, obviously they had difficulties in adjusting, and then they were married off, and after marriage they could not fulfill the responsibilities, especially under stress. And so all of these had marriage difficulties. They were separated. Two of them were separated from their kids. The third also was just now being separated from kids. They had divorced. Two had second marriages to older people. And so this whole history, this whole milieu of not being understood, and then not being being and having had to go through this abuse. And then the second part comes in which which was their interaction with the psychiatric facilities. All of them had multiple diagnoses. All of them have had many prescriptions. They didn't help them. They were called schizophrenia, bipolar affective disorder, depression, and many other things at multiple stages, but they were never recognized as this. So we also discussed on this because some of the factors that why they weren't recognized. One of the factors is because obviously they weren't as articulate, and there was the language barrier because most of the psychiatrists, for example, we learn in English and we speak Urdu, and they spoke the regional languages, which many of us aren't comfortable with. So their condition was always ignored and misunderstood, and they were over medicated. And these so now we come to the third point in which we were fortunate that we were able to keep them. Their attendants were very helpful, and we were able to observe them daily, and we saw that none of the traditional diagnoses they did not fit them, and we saw certain psychiatric features which were common in all of them. For example, all of them had social disinhibition. All of them had sort of psychotic, their psychotic symptoms, they weren't persistent. They came and went, and we saw that it was associated with mainly stress. So they weren't persistent psychotic symptoms, and these psychotic symptoms were also of a certain kind that we saw, for example, delusional perception was present, and a sort of some sort of paranoia against their family members, particularly those who had abused them. And but these were not persistent. There were many days when we could not find it. And there another important factor, mood lability, that was the most which I think was missed, which would not be found out at a single sitting, right? Because mood lability, it changes from day to day or after 2-3 days, and there was dramatic changes from like hypomania like state to depression like state within 3-4 days, and then it cycled. And so we saw that all of these had this constellation of features, and all of these had a similar life history, a similar ecological niche, and which included everything from beginning from their life and even till to their interaction with the psychiatric facility. So I applied this concept of ecological, that it is better to understand the condition in terms of ecology rather than in terms of discrete diagnosis, and that we should be more careful and more observant towards finding out mild or borderline intellectual disability, because this many times this does not come up in the history, and you have to dig it up. And we had to, in all of these cases, we had to dig it up very deep before the tendency realized, and we realized that yes, this was what had been going on. So this was my second project.